Okay. Good day, everyone. Welcome to my session on Up Close and Personal with Lightning Experience as a Platform. Hopefully everybody's had a great Dreamforce. Looking forward to the weekend and the flights home and getting back to friends and families. But I'm looking forward to finishing off Dreamforce with this session, as Lightning's been a hot topic, Lightning components and where we can use them throughout the whole of the event. And I was also lucky enough to start the Dreamforce with this session. So Monday morning at 9:30, I also ran this session. So it's kind of nice to finish it off and round it out. Just made a small tweak based on what I've learned from the session as well. So you guys are getting a slightly enhanced version of this session than your counterparts on Monday. So what inspired me to create this session was really viewing Lightning Experience as more than just a UI. It's a platform. It's got APIs. It's got services and facilities that help enrich the solutions that you provide to the users, and also as developers and admins help empower you to create things more rapidly. And not only that, encompass things that you may not necessarily think about having to include or consider, just are there for you in the background. So my name's Andy Fawcett. I'm FinancialForce's CTO. Andy in the Cloud is my Twitter handle. And FinancialForce, I'm also a blogger and author and Salesforce MVP, so my blog goes by the same name, andyinthecloud.com. FinancialForce, briefly, is a company that's been around since 2009. Over that time, we've acquired and built solutions around a whole ERP suite natively on the Force.com platform. So our solutions run entirely on Force.com or on Salesforce platform around financials management, professional services automation, billing, RevRec, and forecasting. We're around 700 employees, so grown pretty rapidly over the years, and have a really well-established customer base, around 1,400 customers across the world. As you can see from the figures there, we're growing and expecting to grow as we continue into the year and into next year. We are recruiting. We're at the expo, where you can talk to us about if you want to join us, or if you're interested in our products, please come and chat with the team, or catch me later after this session if you'd like to know a little bit more about FinancialForce and our products. So why consider Lightning Experience as its own platform? Well, today, as I think most of us are now aware, it's no longer feasible to get users in and sell a single product to them and walk away. It's a service-based economy. You've got to continue to engage your users by delivering an amazing user experience that's compelling, useful, and usable to them. What does it actually mean in practice to do that? It's not all about the glitz and glamour of a user experience. It has got to encompass things like consistency, look and feel, and usability. I've had a little bit of a play with the promise JavaScript syntax there. How many people know about promises in JavaScript? Excellent, good stuff. So I'm having a little bit of play there, but really that does encapsulate the fact that you need to do all of those things to deliver a compelling and user experience that helps your solution endure and keeps those subscriptions going. Otherwise, you will get unhappy users. So that is actually pretty hard, and most of us overlook it, or in a rush to get our product to market and get things out very quickly. The kind of predator that stalks a lot of our time is really time to market. So how can we actually leverage Lightning Experience to take on some of that burden for us? And that's what this session's really about, just to highlight quite a growing number of features and services that are in Lightning Experience that we can take advantage of, that otherwise we'd have to spend development time thinking about. Usability falls into usability captures quite a number of aspects, such as it's got to be a safe and secure environment for users to operate in. It has to be great for collaboration. That's key for the way that we work and operating with software today. It's got to be accessible as well. So there's a number of standards that make software accessible in the browser, various screen readers and other devices. Personalization is important. People like to customize their workspace, their desk themselves that they work on, so why shouldn't it apply to the software that you use? Consistency in the way that they navigate, the actions that they take, various notifications and pop-ups. They're all very different or subtly appearing in different areas, it doesn't give the user a good sense of it being an integrated application. And many of us are enjoying the fact that we're on the Salesforce platform because we are integrated with CRM perhaps, and we're using some of the facilities and objects from that application as well as standard services. So it's got to all kind of look and feel as the same suite of applications. Conversely, though, we do have the capability to add our own persona, our own style as developers or as development partners. We can add our branding and logo placement in there. And we saw with the My Salesforce thing in the keynotes that Salesforce are taking that even further with giving customers options for further branding beyond that simple sort of logo placement and such like. So let's talk about Lightning Experience in terms of a more technical perspective, and I tend to think of it as a container. Lightning components are nothing without somewhere to live. They have to have that place, instantiate them, display them, and there's certain events and management of the memory in the browser that container needs to manage for those components. They don't just manifest into life all by themselves. So what does a container actually involve, and how many are there? Well, it turns out there's actually quite a few Lightning containers. And you might think, well, do I just need to target some of these Lightning containers and not others? Well, the model and the concept of Lightning is that you build components that are kind of agnostic of the container. They'll work in multiple containers. And the advantage for you and your users is that you're ultimately targeting different devices and different contexts. So users might be using mobile, they might be using tablet, they might be on a desktop, they might be in community, they might be in Flow. I learned, like many of you today at this event, that Flow now supports Lightning components, which is pretty cool. So there are many ways in which you can leverage Lightning components, and thinking about testing and developing your components so it fits into those containers is really an important consideration if you're to get the full value out of the vision of Lightning and Lightning containers and make your application more accessible. So we're going to focus on the ones on the left in this session. Technically, it is one container. Lightning Experience is just one container, but it does have two different navigation modes, which I want to highlight to you both, to you guys, because it does give you some interesting aspects of what the features are for navigating and what the options are. Interesting aspect of developing components in multiple containers is there is kind of this mantra that one container to rule them all, one component rather to run in all the containers. Occasionally, we do find that certain containers do behave differently from one another. So try to make sure that you don't implement conditional logic in your components to deal with that. Use a model like the one shown on this screen where your component is consistent in both containers, and maybe you have a component wrapping it that's distinct to it, that's specific to each container, and that deals with the nuances and the differences. Hopefully those should be very thin, those components. In most cases, if you pay careful attention to the documentation, you'll see the differences between the containers, but in most cases, components are fairly easily able to run in different containers with very little changes. But there's just some thoughts from me to you guys in terms of how you might deal with running components in different containers and some of the considerations. So let's talk about those Lightning Experience navigation types. So most people are familiar with Classic. You've got tabs across the top. You click on the tabs. You go to the list view. You click on the records. You see the record displayed. And Lightning Experience initially is very similar to that. You've still got tabs, and you can see your list views, and you can open your records. That's what's called the standard navigation these days. There is a new navigation on the block, and that's called console navigation. And I'll show you that in a demo. It is subtly different from standard navigation in that you can view multiple records at any given time as opposed to just one record that you've clicked on. And this isn't excluding the fact that you can open new tabs in your browser, by the way. That's of course always possible, but there's a certain clunkiness involved in multiple browser tabs. So we'll take a look at the different navigation models in Lightning Experience. It's worth pointing out that at the present moment in time, the console navigation mode is a chargeable feature unless you happen to have an OEM license, in which case Salesforce are making that possible for you to bundle that and provide that to your customers as part of your OEM license agreement. So let's have a look at those two navigation models. We'll take a bit of a tour around one or two other features of Lightning Experience as well. So what I've done, this is what I call my widget app. It's a very basic app, and it's deliberately so because I wanted to strip back all of the other things that you see when you see Lightning, because you see all these dashboards and lots of other actions and things. And the purpose of doing this is to really see what the bare bones, bare metal of Lightning experience actually is, and from that you can get a better idea of all of the features. So first of all, whenever you see this icon here, it's actually a Lightning component. It's a very simple Lightning component that just shows an image. But the reason you see multiple ones is this is your home page. You can put as many components on this as you like. So we can see lots of these images on the screen. So whenever you see me clicking through the demo throughout the rest of this session and you see that icon, you get that kind of mental reminder that, yeah, that's a place where I can put my own component of my making. So you can augment the Salesforce UI with your component. And the opportunities for placing these Lightning components are always growing. We saw Flow as one example. That's been extended. We've got other examples that I'll show elsewhere in the demos. So keep an eye out for that guy, and you'll see further ways in which we can augment the Lightning Experience UI. So I'm just using the standard navigation here. I went straight to the Widgets tab. I've got some records, and you can see as I'm navigating, it's replacing the open record that I've got. I can go to a tab called Widget Builder, which is just a tab of my own making. I can go to Warranties, and I can see all the records there. So it's a very familiar navigation experience with Lightning. We'll come back to the utility bar at the bottom here, but I have got the main thing about the utility bar is it does stay resident as I'm navigating around the system. So yet again, you can see our Lightning component down here. So you could put your own thing in there that's helping the user as they're navigating around the system. The utility bar is a very useful aspect. So let's switch over to console mode now. Console mode is a different app type. Remember, when you create an app, you have to make that radio button choice, whether it's navigation, standard navigation, or console. So I've just created two apps to illustrate each of the two modes. So I'm just going to close down those tabs so I can start from the beginning. So at first face value, it doesn't look all that different, except that when I start opening records, I've got this sidebar on the side, and the records are actually opening individually in their own separate tabs. So I now have a multi-tab experience within the browser. And this is geared towards users that maybe have multiple accounts open and they want to do comparisons between them visually and find out what's going on. I can also open up different types of records. I'm not limited to warranties. I can open up widget records as well. I have the ability to pin tabs if I'm particularly interested in these records persisting or staying on the left-hand side. Finally, the interesting thing about this particular navigation model, if I actually refresh the page, just simulating logging off and logging on, everything returns back to normal. It remembers my working environment between log-ons, which is actually quite handy if you have to log off, go home, come in the next day. You don't have to reopen all your tabs again. So the console mode is a very workspace-orientated way of working. Here's a summary which I'm not going to go through in detail, but you can use as a reference after the session. All the decks are uploaded to the chatter feeds for the sessions. But it gives you an idea of some of the features. You saw that the pin feature and the record list split view are, of course, unique to console. But some of the features like the list view itself, the utility bar that I showed, are equally applicable to both console mode and classic mode. Tab history, actually, I did forget to demonstrate. I'll show you that very briefly since I'm still in console mode. This is pretty neat. It's actually kind of more sort of Lightning tailored version of your browser history in a way. It's remembering the navigations that I did as I've navigated through the system. So that's a nice utility bar component just provided by Salesforce. So what are some of the core services? Essentially, when you go to create a Lightning app, you go to the app manager and say New App, and then you pick your navigation model, standard or console, and you get to pick the tabs that belong to that app. The interesting thing with how many ISVs or packaging partners are in the room in terms of creating package solutions? Okay, one or two. When you're doing that, the tabs are upgradable. So one of the classic problems we have as partners when we're shipping new versions is if we added tabs to a new version, they don't automatically deploy to the users. With Lightning apps, they do that. So it's a good mechanism for getting deployments of your new features out. So thanks Salesforce for making tabs upgradable. That's been really helpful. So once you've made a decision about the tabs and the type of app, you can then start using some components that are available in Lightning. And these are available and features available just out of the box, though the Kanban view is also one of my favorites. Okay, interesting. Kanban view is also really useful for breaking down records by a certain category, a stage. You know, if you're looking at opportunities, that might be the opportunity stage that you're breaking it down by price, for example. There are also a myriad of components that Salesforce provide that are available for people to customize onto your pages, as well as using your own application code. The Flow, how many people have used Flow in the room? How many people are Flow fans? Oh, good number of you. So Flow is definitely getting quite a lot of investment by Salesforce, and justifiably so. It's a tremendously flexible tool, regardless of whether you're using it to build a UI or implement some business process automation. The left-hand side is arguably looking a bit dated these days, but you know, that's for the admins to use. On the right-hand side, you see the Lightning version of it. So you can actually embed a flow inside Lightning. And I see that on my particular widget demo over here. That UI was built through drag and drop. And obviously, it's just a demo UI, but that was all just built with the flow tool. I can drag that straight onto the Lightning record page with zero code. So for developers building their own custom UIs in Lightning Experience, they may want to actually navigate the user around Lightning Experience to a specific record, to a specific tab at certain given times. So the navigation model at the top might not be sufficient for them. They might want certain actions to appear in their own UIs that they're building to navigate them to different places. So I built this demo called the Lightning Navigation Events demo that shows you the type of events your Lightning components can send to the container to tell the container to say, take the user to this place. So I'll give you a demonstration of that, and it is all the code for this is available in my GitHub repository. And the way that I've geared this up is the events are shown at the top here. So those are actually word for word the actual Lightning events that you send, and the names of the fields are the parameters to those events. So they'll match the documentation in Salesforce, and it'll give you a good way of trying it out without having to write any code. It's kind of like a little sort of test harness, if you like. So let's go to I'm going to switch back to standard mode for this one. Doesn't really make a great deal of difference, but it just helps with the demo a little bit. So some of the navigation events that you can send actually allow you to invoke Salesforce's own UI. So if I actually wanted to create a record, that's the standard UI, but I invoked it from my button in my code. Now, how many people in the room have used the infamous URL hack to default fields? Yeah, quite a few people. No longer do you need to do that in Lightning Experience. Salesforce have given us a capability to override the defaults that are shown in the field, and it's a supported actual API, so I can change the default name there, and that'll appear in my UI. So I can do calculations in my own code and populate the default fields for the user. So that's another advantage of using that event. I can also bring up the edit dialog, the standard edit dialog for records. And I can also navigate to different pages. So for example, if I wanted to navigate to a particular record, give it the record ID, press test, and it takes me directly to that record. So there's quite a lot of flexibility in the navigation APIs. Finally, you can also bring up the standard file viewer. So if you're writing an application that does a lot with attachments and files, and you want to, say, show the files in a different way that's not different from the standard UI, you can still reuse the same standard Salesforce file viewer. Again, I'm using my cog icon as an example there, but that UI I didn't create. I just sent an event that says, show me that file ID. I gave it the file ID and sent the event, and it brought it up. So built-in file viewer. And that's not a trivial thing to develop, by the way. There's lots of different file formats out there and different considerations for that. So that is a really good freebie from the container is the file viewer. Lightning components can actually determine the context to some degree as well. So they know about the context they're running in. You can put a Lightning component on a record page, and of course it's kind of useful for that component to know which record it's sitting on. It'll be pretty useless in most cases if it couldn't. So you can implement the Force has record ID interface in your Lightning component, and you get past the ID of the record. You can also implement the navigate the notification APIs to get some of these fancy pop-ups. So they might not look like rocket science, but to create the different modes for information, error, warning, all the icons, also these kind of fancy kind of overlay ones. There's a bit of work involved in that to do it properly, and that's something that Salesforce has saved us from having to do. We've actually got APIs that do those, and those are exactly the same APIs that Salesforce use, by the way. No longer are we actually using things that are only available for partners, and Salesforce kind of use their own internal stuff. They're actually building their own products using these container functions and APIs as well, which is great for us and great for Salesforce. So I'm going to quickly demonstrate the contextual aspect of it. Many people ask me about utility bar and the context of it. So this particular utility bar, actually this one is very static. It didn't do anything when I was changing earlier. It just sat there, did nothing. And that's perfectly fine. Maybe a utility bar is just like a calculator or something you want to do. It's just always there, but it's not very contextual. In this case, because I'm a developer, I'm very curious about all the fields of the objects that I'm looking at. So I can go to my widget. I can open up a widget, and you can see the utility bar automatically determines what record I'm on and the fields and the API names. If I go to the warranties tab and open that up, it's changed to warranty, and it's flipped back. Now, if I go to the home page, it clears itself out because there's no object there. So that demonstrates a contextual utility bar. Now, the way that's achieved is through, I'm jumping around a little bit here. Let me make sure I don't skip something for you guys. Yeah, I'm going to skip that back, a little bit out of sync. So the way that's achieved with utility bar is you have to implement a component that's got the available for all pages and that has record ID. Now that's fine, you'll get the ID, but if you monitor changes, you have to do that second line of code where you're looking for changes on the record ID attribute. If you do that, then you will be able to see the changes as the user's navigating around. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the utility bar. We're configuring the utility bar through the app manager. You basically go there and pick the components that implement the interface, which is the available for all page types. And the utility bar has more to it than just showing static text at the bottom here. You can actually dynamically modify that text and the icon. So I've created a couple of demos that help hopefully illustrate the way in which you can do that. So the utility bar API demo is a bit like my navigation API demo. It shows you some of the methods that you can do with the utility bar and call different methods. So the highlight method is available here, and you can see how it changed the color at the bottom when I sent the highlight method. So that's useful. You can also change the width of the utility bar. So if I change this particular one to, let's go with 300, it changes automatically. I'll put that back to something more workable. So there's quite a myriad of methods you can do to change the behavior. Now, interestingly, you can do that on any utility bar component. I personally have something on my to-do list to maybe ping Salesforce to ask whether that might be a security exploit there. I can imagine some possibilities of malicious code messing with other people's utility bars, but that's possible at least today. So I'd certainly urge you to pause if you're thinking of doing something with all those utility bar options and not your own. But let's move on to the demos. Progress is an aspect that sometimes is difficult for users to monitor. If you kick off something in the background, where do I go to know what it's doing, and who notifies me when it's finished? So we can use the utility bar to actually track progress. So I'm emulating a background process here. When I click Start, it minimizes the utility bar, and you can see at the bottom, in fact, what I'm going to do is just change this up a little bit so you guys can get a better view of that. You can see it's ticking away. I'm also oscillating the icon, so I'm using the icon API to change the icon between the little star and the hammer icon. So you get a nice sense of progress. What I've also done in this demo is created a notification. So after clicking that, after about 3 seconds, it will change color. So something's happened, and it notifies me to that happening. And I can click on that, and I've emulated a confirmation message, and I mark that as red, and it disappears. I can stop my counter as well, it'll just keep on going. So hopefully it gives you some ideas of sort of the things you can do with the utility bar API. It's a very powerful container for components that you want to stay resident, as well as got some nice usability features as part of it. So we've covered the utility bar and the type of things you can do with it, tracking. Before we move off the utility bar, when you actually go to configure it, there is a portion of the UI that's dedicated to your attributes. So you could think of a utility bar component you give to people. It does nothing, but you just give that component to them. And sometimes you want them to customize its behavior, so you can expose properties for them to switch on and off for your component. So you don't have to hard code things or add custom settings somewhere else. So it turns out that if you just use the design attribute feature, which is the same feature you use to expose attributes in Lightning App Builder, if you use that feature, they appear when you're configuring the Lightning the utility bar on your app. So it's pretty neat. Salesforce are exposing configuration UIs that are custom to our own components as part of their own configuration. Obviously, this is the standard configuration for utility bar component. This is the custom bit. So really, really nice piece of integration there. Okay, so let's move a little bit further forward to actions. There's 3 types of actions. You've got actions, the most obvious ones are the ones that appear on the records. Right? You've got edit, delete, all that sort of thing. So you can add your own to that list of actions as well. So I'll give you a demonstration of that. Lightning quick action and quick action without header is basically not showing the kind of the title and the footer here. If you implement that second interface, is the way to go. So if you implement those into either of those interfaces, you'll have the capability to provide a Lightning custom record action. You can get context as well, because again, these are actions on a record. You need that information about what the record is the user's looking at. So if you implement those has record, has a subject name, you'll get that context coming through. Standard record actions are essentially you changing the behavior of Salesforce. So you saw earlier when I created a new record or edited a record, I got a standard Salesforce UI. Now, most of the time, you should make sure that's good enough. And if it is, great, because that saves you some development time, and maybe you can just add your own Lightning components onto that and you're done. But if you really need something more crafted, more user experience, like a wizard, the widget object is probably very basic, so it's a bit overkill to create a wizard for this thing. But you get the point. If you wanted to actually override that, you can do that with standard record actions. You can say, I don't want Salesforce UI to show, I want my UI to show. I'll show you that in a moment. One word of warning, however, is that the console mode doesn't currently support that. So if this feature is important to you, you may want to decide to put your widget wizard on another tab, and just encourage people to use that tab rather than the new action. Finally, global actions. Global actions are available from the top right-hand corner of Lightning Experience and give you a way of invoking things that are a bit like the utility bar. They're kind of above your particular tabs in your application. They're common actions that users might want to perform. They're not contextual, though, so they're kind of manager-type actions, creating new things. You might want to spin your wizard up from a global action. So let's have a quick tour of those particular actions. So the first one was adding an actual action to the record view. So this is the standard record view. You can see the Lightning component nestled there as well, proving that we can customize this page as well. This is the flow component, or the path component rather, by the way. You can drag that one on. It's another freebie. So I've added widget manager here. So I click widget manager and it just pops it up. So that's my real estate. I can put whatever I want in there. It could be as complex or as basic as I need. It's just got an image in there. We're really just interested in the mechanics of it for this demo. So that was the record level ones. The override ones I've done for new widgets. So when I click that, it doesn't bring up the standard UI, it brings up my wizard UI. So I can complete that UI and I can hit save and it takes me back to the regular. So that was a navigation event, by the way. We saw that navigation event earlier when you were saying take me to that. That save button just fired that navigation event which took you back. So you don't have to deal with URLs in Lightning Experience, which are very fragile. You don't have to figure out all the URL syntax. You just use proper supported APIs. Finally, the global action. So the widget manager pops up, and this is kind of a neat sort of UI convention that Salesforce have created here. The widget managers, the global actions, rather, way support multiple windows, so you can actually keep opening them, and eventually they start to stack up upon each other. and then you can close them down again and they pop up. They're also resident as well, so I can actually move around and do this. Interestingly, they even figure out that the utility bar gets in the way, so kudos to the Salesforce UI people on this. They've really thought about. I spent a little while trying to break it and I couldn't really. It's pretty neat. So these can also be maximized into full screen mode or minimized, kind of like very Windows-esque, I guess, and keep those at the bottom. So some interesting techniques for that. They're very resident. Those are the global actions. Okay, so I'm going to skip, in the interest of time, pages and templates, and I'm going to move straight to the console navigation API. So we had a look at the console navigation API earlier, and this also, like the utility bar, has its own rich API for finding out what's going on in console mode, because the whole idea with console mode is it's workspace. You might want to add usability functions that say, oh, you've got these accounts open, let me compare them, or do you want me to open tabs that relate to this filter criteria? So you might want to use this API to extend the console mode with more usability features and functions. So the API does allow you to get a list of all the tabs. That's quite important to implement some of this functionality. And you can also listen to the navigation as they're moving around it. So let's switch into console mode. Console app. So I've actually got a few things open here, and maybe I didn't want those. That was kind of yesterday's job. Today I want to start something else. I'm not interested in what I was doing there. So there isn't actually a close all feature. So I've used the global action menu to bring my demo up. So I can see all the tabs that are open. In my demo, I've got to close all tabs. And the code behind these is generally, on average, 4 or 5 lines of code. It's pretty simple to call these APIs. So that closes all the tabs pretty quick. And bombs out Lightning Experience. First time it's done that on me. Let's try a refresh. Okay. I'm going to try that one more time. Close all tabs. Okay, seem to have survived there. It's the very first time it's done that to me. So close all tabs. Now, another usability feature I just mentioned earlier is kind of what happens if the user knows what type of records they want to open. You don't really want to go searching for them on the left-hand side. You could probably have some list view filters by account of certain status, like red accounts, something like that. But what about adding a usability feature that says, I know the criteria you're searching for, let me open the tabs. So I'm deliberately just going to go back to the home page here, just so we can see the full effect of it. So this particular demo I created that opens the top 5 hot accounts. It's a very simple bit of Apex code that runs a query, gets the top 5 hot accounts, and when I press it, it goes off and starts opening those tabs for me. So I've added a neat bit of automation using the console API into Lightning Experience. Okay, so we're at the end of this session. We're pretty good for a bit of Q&A if we have any questions. Documentation is Lightning Developer Guide, well worth a peruse through. That particular utility bar trick was only found in one of the deepest topics in there. I personally believed it wasn't possible until I read that. The console developer guide is standalone. It's a really good overview of both the classic console and Lightning console. My blog is Andy in the Cloud, and all the code and the demos for this are up on the GitHub site. I do have a book, gracious plug for that, and you can also check out some Trailhead modules. Any questions? If you've got questions, can you please come to the mic and ask them? Thank you, guys. Okay, no questions? Brilliant. Okay, well, happy travels on home, and enjoy the rest of your Dreamforce.